So a couple weeks ago, it was raining in California. It was one of the only days per year that it rains out here. And we were photographing a wedding. I put my bridal party underneath a canopy, and it was a very small venue. There's not a lot of places to go, right? The mom of the bride comes up behind me and whispers in my ear, and she goes, "Are you really just gonna photograph them right here?" And I turned and I looked at the mom and I was like, "It's raining everywhere else. Where else do you want me to go?" She said, "Why don't you take them down to the garden?" And I said to her, "In the mud, in the rain, is that what you want me to do?" And she said, "Well, you're the professional and figure it out." And that got me thinking, if I would have known that we would deal with some truly irrational people when I started wedding photography, would I have ever got into wedding photography? Have you guys ever had any client horror stories? If you have, I would love to hear them. Leave them down in the comments below. And that brings me to my next point. For those of you guys who are in business and looking to take your business to the next level and attract only your ideal clients, I want you to check out my new free webinar, The Booking Blueprint, where I cover how to attract, retain, and how to book your ideal clients. So go down below. The link is thebookingblueprint.com. Check out the webinar, register. It is free.
One of us.
Now, there are 5 things that I wish I knew before becoming a wedding photographer that would have really helped me overcome hurdles that I experienced throughout my career. The first one of those is that you will not have weekends off. Now, I know this seems obvious, right? But what I didn't anticipate was that I would never have a weekend off, because even if I was not shooting a wedding on a weekend, my clients all want to either do meetings on weekends, or they want to review their photos on weekends, or they want to do their engagement sessions on weekends.
Just stop. Just stop it.
I had to kind of get used to the fact that having weekends off would kind of just never happen, at least until I grew my business a little bit. If you are like a young parent, or you want to spend time with your kids on the weekends, wedding photography is going to be probably going to be a challenge for you if that's the only time you have to do those things. But on the flip side of it, obviously there's a lot of benefits to being a wedding photographer. But if you're looking for weekends off, that is definitely not one of them. Number 2, the second thing that I didn't really anticipate before becoming a wedding photographer is the kind of shape, physical shape, that you have to be in to do it. Now, a lot of you know me, I was a police officer prior to becoming a wedding photographer, but I gotta be honest with you, like, I spent a lot of time in the car. I worked out because, I had to maybe be in shape one day in case I got into a fight, but I never really needed my cardio as much as I do as a wedding photographer. As a wedding photographer, you're not only carrying heavy equipment, right? But you're running back and forth. Oftentimes you're dressed in a suit and it's 100 degrees outside and you have to be on your feet all day. I guess that's something that I probably should have mentioned first, right? If you are a wedding photographer, you're looking to become a wedding photographer, be ready to be on your feet for sometimes 10 to 12 hours in a day with very little time to sit. So there are things you can do to help this. Obviously, find some insoles for your shoes. But when you're first starting out, it's not something that you think of right away. But being in shape will definitely help you as you are getting into this career. If I wasn't working out and doing simple workouts, push-ups, pull-ups, things like that, it would be a lot harder to do my job at the level that I currently try to do it at. Oftentimes, you've got to hike to locations, you've got to run back to the car. And if you're working with a high-stress wedding planner, you're oftentimes going to have to be working nonstop without any water for long periods of time throughout the day. The third thing that I wish I knew is that you have to be a people person. If you are an introvert, if you don't like connecting with people, this is going to be a really hard job for you. And it's not impossible. I by nature am an introvert, but I learned how to be an extrovert when I need to. And I think it's important to understand that this business is all about relationships. It's not just that you're documenting your clients' relationships. It's about you having to form relationships like many other businesses are, right? You have to go out there and you have to make friends with vendors. You have to go out there and you have to make friends with the people who are supplying you things like your labs and stuff like that. You've got to make sure that you are working with the bridal party. You've got to be a likable person for a lot of people. And I told you guys I was a police officer, so I had to really reframe the way that my personality was when I got into this career full time.
Don't be the asshole, America. Don't be the asshole.
Also, one more benefit to being able to connect with people is the ability to get natural expression from your clients. I think it's really, really important to be able to connect with them and get them to laugh and be able to form a deep relationship with them. And I've always said that the clients that we form the best relationships with are the ones that end up being with us for many, many years to come.
Oh, all of
love you. Come over here, big group hug.
So back when I was starting my business, my dad told me that in order to be successful in business, I have to keep my overhead low. And at the time, I remember thinking, well, that's easy. I've got what, a $15 a month gallery fee and a couple of subscriptions here and there. Oh boy, as we grew our business, I did not anticipate how expensive it was to run a photography studio.
I'm broke as shit.
If you run your studio right and you're doing IPS and you're charging appropriately for your services, obviously you can make pretty good profit margins. But when you start hiring out employees, when you start doing things like obviously getting your insurance, paying all of your taxes, buying new gear, updating your gear, and advertising and hiring subcontractors, all of those things can add up pretty quickly. So if your business is not in the position where it's charging enough up front, you're gonna have a very hard time scaling your business. Now, thankfully, we're at the point now where we have a great team. They do the majority of our weddings, but we've been able to charge appropriately to be able to not only afford them and give our clients great service, but also be able to make a profit margin for ourselves. So one of the pieces of advice that I have for you that I wish I knew is to keep your overhead as low as possible for as long as you can. Don't be afraid to invest in things, but don't be investing in a brand new camera every time a new camera comes out. Instead, invest in your education, invest in your marketing. All of those things will provide a much better return at a much faster rate than buying the things that our industry tries to sell us, like cameras and lenses and all that stuff that we love to buy because it is a lot of fun. And the fifth thing that I wish I knew before becoming a wedding photographer, that is going back to the intro of this video, is that you are eventually going to run into an unhappy or an irrational client. I want you to understand that those two things don't always go hand in hand, right? Sometimes people are unhappy and it's our fault, right? Sometimes people are irrational and there's really nothing that we can do about it aside from trying to better manage expectations. I will tell you though that every time that you guys run into either an unhappy or an irrational client, or one that's both, it's usually something that we can learn from, right? We can learn about the mistakes that we made and we can go ahead and adjust them. But I gotta tell you, man, as an artist, as a creative, it always hurts when somebody comes to us and they're like, hey, we didn't like this, or we didn't like that, we didn't have a good experience.
That kind of hurted me though, cause it's like, why would you think that of me?
And you got to understand that's all just part of the process of being an entrepreneur. You can't please 100% of the people 100% of the time. You can do your best. And if you do your best consistently, you running into unhappy clients is going to be at a much less often pace than you would typically do if you're not managing their expectations correctly, okay? Now, one of the things that I always like to tell photographers is your client experience is the number one thing that is going to affect the longevity in the business, right? So if you want to have a long, happy business, if you want to make a lot of money in this business, you have to always focus on that client experience. And sometimes when you're dealing with irrational people that can get mad at you for things like I described at the very beginning of this video that are completely out of your control, you have to learn how to make those people happy as best you can, right? And it sucks because you have to swallow your pride. Sometimes you have to just give them what they want to make them happy. But at the end of the day, you do need to understand that when you are good at your marketing, that's going to be like 5% or 2% maybe of the clients that you totally attract to your business, right? If you're marketing correctly, your dream clients, the people you want to work with, they are going to find you. And when they find you, they are going to be in your orbit for a very long time if you treat them right. But you will run into irrational people. And my best piece of advice for you, if you haven't yet, and for those of you who are going to run into irrational people, is to just not let it ruin your day, not let it throw you off plan. Don't try to overcorrect the ship if you have one person who's mad about something that you can't really control, right? Just make sure you get over it quickly, try to make them happy, and move on to the next one.
This is fine. I'm okay with the events that are unfolding currently.
One of the things that I found that really helps you to avoid this type of client is to manage their expectations from the get-go. And by doing this, what we have to do is we have to attract a client that specifically values us for what we do. They value photography, they value art, and they're not going to be nitpicky over small things that are just completely beyond your control. And we have found that communication is typically the one way that we can do this, and it will attract the people into our orbit that we want to work with, that value what we do, and that love working with us. So again, if you guys want to learn more about that, learn how we use structured communication, learn how we use marketing roulette in our Elevate method for sales and relationships, just check out our free webinar, The Booking Blueprint. You can just sign up below and register. It's free, and pick a time that works for you guys. And you'll be able to see exactly how we go about working and finding the right client to come into our business and our orbit. That's all I have for you guys today. Again, make sure you leave your horror stories down below. Every photographer loves to read through horror stories. We know that we've all had them. We've all seen them. If you guys like this video, again, please consider subscribing and tap the thumbs up button. Thank you so much for checking it out, and we will catch you on the next one.